Hello, my name is Drake Greenwood, and I'm here to talk to you today about concussions as it relates to the NHL, also a little bit of the NFL, and more specifically in the NHL, the position of the enforcer. So let me start off by saying that I am a big hockey fan. I grew up watching. My dad played, and we just kind of always have liked the sport. Being from Houston, I never got to play it, but it is a very fun sport to watch. I think more Americans should get involved with it, especially in the South, even though we don't have that many rinks, because it's truly exhilarating to watch. And the Stanley Cup playoff system is arguably the best playoff system in the whole world, and it provides a certain level of entertainment that's really hard to find anywhere else. So starting off, recapping this video, the video is done by Bob Lee, and Mr. Lee always does a very good job of just producing quality content and giving you all the information around a certain topic and event, and I think this is another case. So well done to him and Outside the Lines. It starts off, and the whole video is really highlighting a man named Mike Peluso, who was an enforcer for 8 years in the NHL. And to what an enforcer was, before I even really get going, an enforcer is a guy in hockey who basically his job is to police the game. Hockey, obviously, they have officials and penalty minutes and penalty boxes and all that, but it's always kind of had the reputation of a sport that polices itself. And by that, I mean a sport that when somebody breaks the rules, even though they might be penalized by the rules, the other team takes it within their own hand to deliver an extra penalty, oftentimes with a fight or just a very physical play, like slamming the guy into the boards, or a hip check or something along those lines. It's very physical and gives a physical punishment to every action, or an action that the other team determines is worthy of a consequence. So then in order to keep your good players on the ice and to protect your good players from getting in fights, hockey has created this position, and it's been around for forever, as long as the game of hockey has been a thing, called the enforcer. The enforcer isn't always as skilled as the other players. A lot of times they're like a fourth line defenseman or something along those lines, to where they can provide a little bit on the ice if they need to, because at the end of the day, you can't just be a complete scrub to make it to the NHL, excuse me. But they really are on the team to fight and to enforce physical pain on the other team when it is determined it is needed. So Mike Peluso was an enforcer in the NHL. He's a bad guy. I mean, he's just really tough, hard-nosed dude. You can kind of get that grip in the video. But he now, after 8 years in the NHL and many, many fights and many, many blows to the head, as those fights often lead to, is suffering from basically day-to-day migraines, seizures. He can't go outside without sunglasses on. He usually has to wear them inside because his head hurts too bad, and it's really just a bad situation. And clearly he's suffering from some sort of mental condition, basically because of his hockey position and job. It also highlights a player named Bob Provert, who is a very famous enforcer in the NHL, and one of the very first people Mike Peluso ever fought in the NHL. And Mr. Provert's position is very interesting because he was one of the very first people. Tragically, he died at a pretty young age, and was one of the very first NHL players to donate his brain for medical science and to be tested for CTE. So Mr. Provert, after he died, sent his brain to the autopsy, and they found CTE in his brain. CTE, that is, which is a very common injury that they're finding in football players. A lot of these days, that is a mental illness caused by repeated trauma to the head and multiple concussions. And concussions are kind of the main reason for CTE to happen. So he's one of the very first players in the NHL to find it. We saw his widow in the video, and she was clearly upset and sad about talked about how he had to abuse drugs and alcohol because of his daily head pains and everything that he was dealing with. Very similar to Mr. Peluso. And I can't speak to whether he was doing any drugs or alcohol, but he does speak to his day-to-day pain of just headaches and migraines and seizures and just really struggling at life at the moment. So where it gets complicated here is that Commissioner Bettman is the commissioner of the NFL or the NHL, excuse me, and he denies that there is any link to CTE in NHL players and thinks hockey is a sport that is not causing problems with the brain and concussions aren't a big issue in the sport. And this is very problematic because it's simply, I mean, it's just not true, which is pretty upsetting for especially people like Mrs. Provert and that have seen the, felt the tolls that hockey can take on a brain. I mean, she's grieving her husband now, and that's just a tragic thing. And for somebody to tell her that hockey wasn't the reason that he got CTE, when clearly, I mean, it's pretty obvious it was, is really sad. And furthermore, there's been, I think, they showed a scientist in this video that's done some research on CTE in hockey players and examined a few brains, and it showed that in the five out of the five hockey players who she's examined, all five of them had CTE. So it's a pretty clear connection. So now where it connects to the NFL, the NFL for a long time denied concussions were an issue, denied. But recently they've become more open to it and are working with it and have accepted that CTE is going to be a part of the game and that football players are definitely going to be susceptible to CTE. And now so they're funding research and stuff to find it and help it. The NHL is still behind the ball. They haven't done any of that. They're not trying to do any research on, to make it better. And their commissioner's basically just denying the fact that CTE can be, hockey can be a cause of CTE. So I think this, kind of comes down to a unique thing, like with concussions in sports. It doesn't take much for one to figure out that it's a real risk when you're playing sports, and that, nowadays it's tough because, like, you argue the fact that, like, okay, these guys have the opportunity to make millions of dollars because they're good at what they do, playing hockey, but they're going to, die young because of it. And so I think as long, like, the ethical dilemma here is, is that okay? Should we still play hockey? Or should they not be allowed to play hockey? Or should we get rid of fighting and stuff like that? So I think you could get rid of fighting. I think it would lose part of the hockey, hockey's game. I think it's kind of part of it. People like hockey because of the fighting. So you could do that, but you would lose part of the game. That's a dilemma. Furthermore, should people just stop playing hockey in general? I think the best thing to do in that scenario is just to educate people and make it their own choice. Nobody's forced to play hockey. Nobody, you might give up the opportunity to make money in it, which is a very tough decision and a lot of people would pass up or would be hard to do for them, but it's not like they have to. It's not like they're being forced to. So, as long as it's their own decision and they have all the information and everybody can come together and say, yes, hockey can cause CTE. You're putting yourself at risk. You might not live as long if you play this game, especially if you're an enforcer, but you're welcome to play, and it's your choice. I think that's perfectly okay, but it has to be your choice, and they have to have the full information. So I think we also need to continue to do research and try to fund and provide and find answers for CTE and see if we can, maybe if we can find a test to prevent it or find out before you die. And so just continue to research and prevent this disease from happening because it's pretty terrible. But at the end of the day, if you want to play hockey knowing that you're risking this, go ahead and play because it's your choice. It's, you shouldn't not be allowed to play if you want to play and that that's a risk. I think it's just your choice. So as long as it's your choice, it's all good. This video is awesome. I really enjoyed it. Concussions are a very hard and unique topic and always very interesting. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you very much.